into a space where beauty meets authenticity and transformation is not just a possibility, but a promise. I'm absolutely thrilled to introduce you to someone truly special, Dr. Rukmini Vinaya Rednam, the compassionate force behind the countless remarkable transformations in the vibrant city of Houston, Texas. Picture this: every curve, every contour crafted with care and expertise, not just by a board-certified plastic surgeon, but your very own cheerleader for self-discovery and confidence. Get ready to embark on a journey where we explore the art of science of feeling your very best self. This isn't just a podcast. It's your cozy corner of empowerment and inspiration. So pull up a chair, pour yourself a cup of kindness, and let's dive into the Confidence Doc podcast with Dr. Rukmini Vinaya Rednam.
Welcome back to another episode of the Confidence Doc podcast. I'm Dr. Rednam, and I'm very excited today. We have a special guest. We have Dominick Richard. She has been a nutritionist with Pop Recovery. She's also certified in Ayurveda, and I'm very excited to introduce her because I think a lot of people don't realize how important nutrition is to their plastic surgery recovery results. So thank you so much for joining us today, Dominick.
Thank you, Dr. Rednam. It's an honor to be here.
For our listeners, a lot of people, like I said, are just not familiar with the importance of nutrition. But can we talk first a little bit about your background, how you got involved in becoming a nutritionist?
Absolutely. So it was on my personal journey to health that I decided to study nutrition. And the first thing that I came upon was plant-based nutrition. And I knew there was something to it because we talked about the anti-inflammatory diet. And that is precisely what we promote in pre-op and post-op nutrition. So we'll dive more into that later. That was the first branch of nutrition that I came across. Then I started to work in the fitness industry and was recommended to get certified with the National Academy of Sports Medicine. So I became a certified nutritionist through them. And finally, I'm also a yoga teacher, and therefore I was introduced to the Indian system of medical and lifestyle, which is known as Ayurveda, which I'm sure you're also familiar with. And so I did 200 hours in Ayurveda, and I surprisingly integrate a lot of Ayurvedic nutrition for recovery because it's all about healing and rebuilding tissues. So it's really perfect for surgery.
That's wonderful. How did you get involved with POP?
So Laura has been a really good friend of mine for the past 10 years. And after she had her plastic surgery, she requested my services to work with her chef. And she thought to herself, every patient should have access to this because as you're recovering from surgery, you might not have the energy or the full capacity to create your meals, but to also choose the foods that are going to support your healing and that are going to also minimize the inflammation or swelling that most patients are aware of.
Exactly. And I think that a lot of people don't think about the aspect that when you have surgery, you are putting stress on your body. You're also pushing your body to recover at a different rate than it normally does. And that requires nutrition, that requires energizing your body. And so you do have to look at before, during, and after surgery in different ways. If you aren't doing that, you're not giving your body all the fuel it needs, right? So when you meet with somebody before surgery, what are the things that you're stressing and the education that you're giving to them?
Good question. The pre-op is probably just as important as after. A lot of people focus on the recovery, but if you have the opportunity to begin working on your nutrition before, we start as early as 6 weeks for plastics patients, and especially for bariatrics because they've gone through a journey of prioritizing protein, low carb, and a lot of them are having inflammatory foods. So what I mean by that is processed or away from the natural state or original state of food. When we meet patients before surgery, we stress the importance of integrating natural foods in their diet, foods that the body recognizes that are going to actually prepare their immune system for the inflammation that is going to show up after surgery, which is a normal result of surgery. As you mentioned, Dr. Rednam, there is a certain amount of stress being put on the body. Therefore, how can we prepare the body, building its strength before encountering? It's almost like you're preparing yourself before you get a cold, right? If you knew that you could build your immunity, we would all be doing it. So it's kind of the same thing for surgery. And what we've noticed is that the anti-inflammatory diet, which consists of removing the principal inflammatory foods, substituting them for the anti-inflammatory counterpart, we've noticed a great increase in overall health, immunity, and decreased swelling post-op.
And what I love about thinking ahead of surgery with it is that after surgery, we're always talking about, okay, we're using ibuprofen to potentially reducing inflammation. We're using icing, we're using massage. This is just us getting another aspect where we can reduce the inflammation. At the end of the day, inflammation and swelling becomes scar tissue. Just another way for us to kind of approach that to optimize somebody's results.
I love how you're mentioning this. A lot of patients talk about how we could prevent keloid scarring and fibrosis. And you just mentioned that inflammation that goes outside of the normal spectrum, so excessive inflammation, can turn into scar tissue. That's amazing. That's new to me.
And so if think about all these components, which like you said, so many people focus on after, but it's just like a marathon. You're going to train beforehand. You're going to be eating properly, you're going to be hydrating, and then you're going to do really well in your race. To me, that's the same way that surgery should be approached, especially elective surgery. Is like we can prep your body and your mind to do the best it can.
Wow, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
So what do you normally talk with? So I know that you kind of prep people beforehand. What are some of the things that you tell them to do? But so you're looking at anti-inflammatory foods. Are you changing what their calories are beforehand? Are you changing protein intake, carbohydrates? What are you generally recommending at that point?
It's a really case-by-case approach, especially because a lot of major weight loss patients come from bariatrics. And therefore, when they do already have the bariatric program focusing on protein, normally we make sure that they have at least 1 gram of protein per kilogram of body weight. However, this varies. Everybody is in a different position, and we meet the patient where they're at. I think that the low carb could be a little detrimental to the healing because carbohydrates are essential not only for brain health, but for glucose and also rebuilding the tissues. Yes, protein goes a lot into it, but we need to have enough food, enough calories, so the body has where to build with. It's the same thing in fitness. If you want to build muscle mass, you need enough protein, but you also need enough calories. And whenever there's a fat transfer, we even talk about eating above maintenance calories to avoid going into catabolism, because if there's loose fat cells and the body is hungry and needs quick energy, it could grab on to those loose fat cells versus once they're rehomed and really set, it becomes a little bit more difficult. So we make sure that they're eating enough, but that they're eating healthy sources of food and healthy calories that the body can convert into healthy tissues instead of inflammatory tissue.
I love that. And I love too that it's putting you in this mindset before surgery. Let's say maybe you hadn't been making the best nutrition choices, that you're already getting your body used to that. So as you're going through surgery and afterwards, maybe you start making some really good changes in your diet as well. Do you notice that, especially now all the medications for weight loss are there, are you finding that you're having to adjust differently versus a post-bariatric patient versus a person who has lost the weight naturally? Well, actually, I'll take it back with the naturally, but somebody who's lost the weight, you with the use of the medications, are you having to adjust a little differently there?
The interesting discussion around semiglutides is that they are not as hungry, but they can eat pretty much anything, versus a bariatric patient has also a limited amount of calorie, but there's certain foods that they either have aversion to or that they simply avoid because they're doing high protein, low carb. So it's two very different patients. The semiglutide patient has a restricted calorie intake, which we can play around with a lot of natural foods, and it's totally fine. But with the bariatric patient, we have to be a little bit more careful around things that can cause their insulin, because a lot of them became insulin resistant. And so I think that's a very important thing to take into account, whether they lost the weight through bariatric surgery versus semiglutide, that we want to make sure that the semiglutide patient are having nutrient dense calories. So if they're having a 1400 calorie diet, we're going to make it nutrient dense. We can include things that are high in fiber that, for example, the bariatric patient, sometimes we won't be able to because they want to keep a low glycemic index at all costs. So that's pretty much the difference. It's maybe a little easier with the semiglutide patient because they can still eat anything. The stomach enzymes and the absorption of the nutrient isn't really affected versus bariatric. As you know, Dr. Rednam, there's, depending on what part of the stomach isn't there anymore because of the sleep and why, they have different absorption. So it's really two completely different. We're working with calorie restriction in both cases, but it's a different profile of calorie on each side. One is low carb, very low. The other one can be moderate and still more of a natural diet.
And for our listeners, this is why it is so important to actually have a certified nutritionist giving you this advice, not just Googling it or finding out what your sister's brother's girlfriend did when she had plastic surgery, because that's just two populations of people. Now, what if you're not a weight loss patient, right? You might have a totally different thing that you need to look at when you're talking about your preoperative nutrition.
100%, yes. And that is why we also do case by case, because some people, before they get to surgery, they still have some weight to lose. So sometimes we need to get to a certain BMI before surgery. And if we're taking the route of the semiglutide, we want to make sure that we're not calorie deficient after surgery, so that we're eating enough to sustain either the recovery, the rebuilding of the tissues. But if there's a fat transfer, we also need to be eating enough to make sure they don't go into fat burning or catabolism for the fat cells to survive and rehome. And therefore, I think the ideally is to work with a person that is not only educated in nutrition, but that also has the experience with surgical patients for the type of procedure that they're receiving, because every procedure has different requirements.
Exactly. And then you can even throw other wrenches into it. Is that culturally different people eat different foods, and so it does actually take some planning to figure out to how to make the right plan for each individual.
Yes, that's another one. Mm-hmm.
So during surgery, what I see on my end is a lot of patients, I'm telling them you need to make sure you're drinking plenty of clear fluids, that you're eating well, but so many of them don't feel hungry. And it kind of doesn't matter if they're a weight loss patient, if they're a patient who's come in and they've always been the same weight and they're looking to make changes, they all just lose their appetite. So what do you usually recommend for them to be able to maintain their calories and nutrition at that time?
So nutrient dense, and sometimes I refer to a lot of superfoods, the small foods that are packed with nutrients. And even if that's just amino acids, we're getting close to our goal, which is the protein and the collagen. I think those two things, along with vitamin A and zinc and vitamin C and iron and folic acid, 7 things, but I'll get into those. But the most important, I would say, are the protein, which collagen enters here, the protein, and the other than the hydration. I'll tell you exactly the foods that I'm thinking. I'm thinking about bone broth, which is packed with collagen. It's packed with amino acids. And then I always integrate chia seeds, because I think it's very easy to put in your water. And even if you're not hungry, if you can at least have a little bit of water with some lemon for the vitamin C, the chia seeds will have protein. It helps with collagen building. It has iron. It has calcium. And I just think that it checks so many
Huh.
boxes. So it's a
I
small,
learned something new. That's great.
amazing. I love it. And another one is hemp hearts. And hemp hearts has all of the amino acids that are essential to the body. They have a lot of healthy fats. And so if you're having a fat transfer, it's something that you can easily add to either coconut yogurt, which is very cooling. So that's something we get from Ayurveda. If you have nausea, I know we can't tell them to have ginger. So no ginger, no turmeric, no garlic. But the coconut yogurt has a very cooling sensation on the stomach. It reduces the stomach acid. Contrary to the dairy that can trigger it, it can cause acid reflux. So we want to make sure to avoid that. So I've reverted patient more towards the coconut yogurt. And interesting is the banana has a B1 vitamin, thiamine, that directly hinders the symptom of the nausea post-op. So those are the go-to foods. And Dr. Rednam, if you allow me, I'll even increase that to fiber-rich foods. Within the first 3 to 4 days, we want to avoid having to take the Miralax, the stool softener. I recommend them kiwi, which is also rich in vitamin C. So if to the bone broth we're able to add certain foods, I would add some maybe lentils for the folate and cooked spinach, which is very high in iron. So we're doing a lot of good foods. And if we want to take it further, I'll add some ghee, clarified butter for the healthy fats to heal the gut and the stomach. I get a little passionate. I can keep on going. For optimal hydration, I always recommend coconut water because I think that it's the best electrolytes that they can have. It has all the natural, the magnesium that the body needs, especially after surgery. And it's very nourishing and it's all natural. So we don't have to cause or add on any inflammation from artificial sweeteners. If we can avoid it, you know.
So those are all wonderful because they're all natural options. They can be very tasty options. And because I will tell you, a lot of people want to drink tons of Gatorade afterwards. Gatorade has a lot of sodium in it. And so often, a lot of times, I'd rather recommend a better, lower sodium choices and things like that. What are your thoughts on protein shakes? Obviously, there's a lot of options out there with protein shakes.
One of the practices we work with, I know they do not accept the whey proteins. And because of that, I've always tried to find the best whole food plant-based. The best one I found so far is one called Truvani. I'm not working for them or any. It's just because it's friendly for bariatric patients, and it's actually a bariatric patient that told me about it because they're all on either Premier or Fairlife.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that is whey hydrolyzed, and it has sometimes casein, which can even be cancerogenic. So I want to take as many people away from it as possible. Again, I understand it serves a purpose right after bariatric surgery when the goal is to lose the weight. I can understand how it's the first thing they resort to because it's no carb. But as you're getting closer to your plastics or to any type of reconstructive surgery or elective surgery, I believe that we need to give the body the least amount of processed food possible. And what I like about this protein, which is whole food plant-based, it's only 5 ingredients. And they're all organic, non-genetically modified. It's sweetened with monk fruit. And the bariatric patients, they're a hard patient to win because they look for high protein, low carb. And when it's whole foods, there's normally more carbs. So this was a challenge. They were all coming to me with the Fairlife and the Premier. And I tried to tell them, yeah, man. And then one bariatric patient told me, Truvani, this is the one. 5 ingredients, low carb, high protein, very clean. So that is the one that I've been recommending so far.
That sounds like a great option. I know I have to really steer people to be careful because some protein shakes out there really are just like milkshakes. They have so much sugar in them. And they're really not helping you. You're just getting a bunch of empty calories. So it's very important, again, that you are doing your research or have somebody who's done their research to be able to advise you on what the proper things are to take.
And a lot of Ensure as well. You know, they recommend the Ensure protein drinks or the meal replacement. And they even have a collagen. Ensure created a collagen to take after surgery. And a lot of patients have been asking me, do you think this is good? And I don't know what your take is on the hydrolyzed collagen, but I tell them that sometimes it's basically bones that were reduced to a powder and the body recognizes it as waste. And when the body sees it as waste and is not able to absorb it, it either goes straight out or it can be stored in the organs, which creates, some problems down the road. So I say our bodies produce the collagen. Let's support into naturally creating the collagen by having vitamin C rich foods and consuming foods that are naturally rich in collagen. So that's the route.
That's my same thought process too, is that let's support our bodies in making what they naturally make versus trying to ingest a substance that we can make ourselves. You also mentioned it for other vitamins, vitamin C, zinc. These are all very important for pro-collagen. And so for creating, and at the end of the day, healing is all about collagen. It's all about us laying down different types of collagen healing. So I like the whole idea as well that we are giving you the building blocks to be able to allow your body to do what it does best.
I love that.
So, and I always think hydration is extremely important, especially when you're doing big liposuction cases, because you are losing a lot of fluid just to your own interstitials, so your own tissues. And that you eventually are going to get that fluid back, but then you flush it out. So you want to keep your system hydrated. And it seems counterintuitive because you're like, I'm so swollen. Why do I need more fluids? But it's because the fluids are not in the place that you need them. And so it's definitely supporting your nutrition with a lot of just water is the best thing out there.
Fruits and vegetables. Sometimes we talk about eating your water. And what we mean by that is that, for example, when you're having fresh fruit, it has the electrolytes that is needed to, and you mentioned this, instead of being intra-tissue, in between the tissues, can penetrate the cell barrier, the mitochondria, I believe, and really hydrate from the inside out the cell. But for that, it needs the electrolytes. And so if we're eating the fresh fruit, let's say the pineapple with the bromelain, so many people rave about the anti-swelling properties. Okay, well, the pineapple is also going to hydrate you because it has the electrolytes that the body needs for it to go to the cell and not just stay in between the layers of tissues.
Correct. So yes, exactly. So it's thinking on another level, and we don't always expect our patients to understand every aspect of it, but it's good to have an understanding of why we're recommending specific things. Are there any particular foods you tell people to particularly stay away from before, during, and right after surgery?
Yes, the top 5 inflammatory foods, which number 1, vegetable oils, anything like canola, palm oil, peanut oil, I believe are highly inflammatory, especially if they are hydrogenated or if they're used for cooking at high temperatures. I will tell them to use for cooking either avocado or coconut oil and raw extra virgin olive oil. Another one that's good for cooking is ghee, but ghee is clarified butter. It's not really butter. Butter itself still has a lot of inflammatory substances, but once it's boiled, then we remove the lactose, the casein, and it's much better, and you can cook with it. Then the second thing is, of course, refined sugar, which causes a lot of inflammation to the body. There's a lot of great alternatives. If I have a bariatric patient, we can talk about monk fruit without the erythritol, because a lot of times it's cut. It's like 5% monk fruit and the rest is the artificial sweetener. So I'll tell them find pure monk fruit or stevia if they don't mind the taste. Otherwise, even natural sources of sweetener like honey, agave, maple syrup, if they have stable insulin, if they're able to have stable blood sugar, then those are also safe routes instead of refined or artificial sweeteners even. I'm not very promoting of artificial sweeteners because of the inflammatory factor. Yeah, like our aspartame, erythritol, and all that. Then soy, if it's genetically modified, is a high inflammatory food. Then I go over gluten. I'll tell them that it's not bread or wheat that is the problem. It's wheat in the United States that has been genetically modified, that is sometimes has a lot of pesticides. So I'll revert them to a more organic bread like sourdough. I think those are much healthier options because the gluten is still covered with all the fiber and the body is able to process it. It's not stripped away and exposed in the gut where it causes inflammation, right? And then at last, the number 5 would be dairy. Now, there's a big discussion around dairy because a lot of people use dairy for protein. After surgery, they'll have Greek yogurt, cottage cheese, especially bariatric patients. The protein powder, they could be doing whey, right? I'll tell them is if you must have dairy, look for a grass-fed version. So at least, right, like even in India, we in Ayurvedic medicine, we talk a lot about ahimsa, which is basically cows that were treated right. So what does it mean? It means that the cows were eating a natural diet, they were eating grass, and they were under the sun. So either grass-fed, pasture-raised, the animal ingested a higher quality food, therefore the milk that they're given or the dairy that's produced is higher quality, less inflammatory, so less acidic, more alkaline, which I think also promotes a better state of healing.
That makes sense, and that is a great list. And I could say someone who grew up eating ghee in food, it's delicious. So you're not missing out by not having butter.
Oh no. And you can put it on everything, your oatmeal, your rice, your legumes.
Yeah.
It's just very versatile.
Yeah, it is, absolutely. So then once we kind of get past that acute phase, so we, in my brain, that's usually like about 6 weeks. That's when we have restrictions or recovery. Most people start noticing their appetite starts kind of picking back up around that time period as well. Are there some things that you might change for more of a maintenance phase of recovery?
Absolutely. The first thing I'll reintegrate is the foods that were prohibited, like garlic, ginger, and turmeric, because they're all excellent for your immunity. And this way, we also avoid any risk of infection. Because you probably also talk about this, Dr. Rednam, how there's a risk of infection after surgery at, I think, around week 3 or 4 post-op.
Exactly, yeah.
Right, as soon as they're able to reintegrate those foods to rebuild their immune system, and also because the immune system sits in the gut, it depends on the healthy microbiota. I always have them have probiotic-rich foods like sourdough, like miso, like if they're having pho. A lot of people like, Vietnamese soup.
Oh, yeah.
The miso, it's a natural probiotic. You can do kimchi, sauerkraut, any fermented foods or coconut yogurt as well. And pairing this with prebiotics like garlic, foods that are rich in fiber, right? Like apples, leafy greens, any root vegetables, legumes, basmati rice, quinoa, even chickpeas. All those foods are going to rebuild the gut health after surgery. And I believe they're also the staple of healthy tissues. So because we're still rebuilding tissues and we want to be in maintenance of their calories, of their new weight, and also for long-term, for substance of their new weight goals, their new body that they've created, I also think that recommending these whole foods that are also on the leaner end are going to be promoting that on the long term. And if we have a patient that likes to have animal products, then I will 100% tell them to reintegrate it at their own taste or whatever they prefer. But I will tell them to get a higher quality protein. So as we mentioned before, if they're having animal dairy or beef, I will tell them grass-fed. If it's chicken, turkey, like poultry, hormone, antibiotic free. And if it's fish, I will recommend them wild caught and egg pasture-raised, free range, so that it's a higher quality animal protein.
And with any surgery, all of these things can apply to any type of surgery, right? We're obviously focused on plastic surgery because that's what I do. But one thing I think that's important is that what you talked about is like you reintegrate and you're being healthy afterwards. And it's same with plastic surgery is that if you want your results to look good long term, you do have to do your part, and that's the maintenance, and that's putting good, healthy things into your body. Because if you're doing that, then your results not only are going to look good, but you will find that long term, you're like, wow, I look even better than I thought my surgery would give me. And it's because your body is so healthy afterwards. So
Absolutely.
I love the way you're kind of thinking about it. That yes, there are 3 different periods that have a lot of overlap. But again, these can be used for any type of surgery because it's really good. The whole goal is for you to help you to heal really well.
Yes, and sustain the long term, because as the plastic surgeon, you lay the foundation, and then it depends on what they eat, what the patient eats, as the building blocks that are going to build on top of the foundation that you lay for them.
Exactly. And I love to take credit for everything, but I will tell you some of my best long-term results have been because I've had a patient who just really took it to heart, took it seriously. They put a lot of their own blood, sweat, and tears and investment into it, and they do their part with being active, being healthy, and they look so amazing because they did all of that. I just started them on part of that process and pathway.
Exactly.
So
I
it's
love that.
wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and knowledge with us. And for those of you who don't know, because I didn't kind of introduce this, Pop Recovery is a wonderful recovery group. They are made up not only of nutritionists, but they have mental health coaches. They have so much support. And I started working with them, one big aspect, because I loved that they had someone like you who would provide that nutrition support that as a plastic surgeon, I have a good understanding of, but I'm not really fully qualified to be able to break it down like you have.
And also the time, right? You only have so much time that you can invest. And I believe that if you can spend more time, speaking of the surgical aspect, then we can support you by covering all these other branches that are conducive to a proper recovery from the surgery and alleviate your workload because you have so much on your plate already. And then we can support your work.
And that's just the thing. It's recovery takes a lot of people for you to recover peacefully and well, right? I've had some people just slug it out on their own, not doing anything. And yes, you can recover, but I want your surgical experience to be a really good one. So Thank you so much for sharing with us today. And just such wonderful insight. And like you said, you got to look at the whole picture with things to really recover very well.
Yes. Well, it was my pleasure. I loved being able to connect with you. It felt like a personal conversation between the two of us.
For any of you listening or considering surgery, Dominique might be one of the wonderful people you get to talk to while you're prepping and recovering through your surgery. Thank you so much, y'all, for listening, and stay tuned for our next episode of the Confidence Doc podcast.
As we wrap up another episode of the Confidence Doc, I want to extend our heartfelt thank you for being a part of our community. If today's conversation resonated with you, remember that Dr. Rednam and her team are here to support you on your journey to self-confidence and beauty. Your story is unique, and it's our privilege to help you create the masterpiece that is your life. If you'd like to book a consultation with Dr. Rednam, you can visit her webpage at drrukminirednam.com. Fill out a contact form, and one of her coordinators will get with you accordingly.